Invasive realities. How cyberspace loops into existence.
Part 1. An unfixed reality. Reality is not fixed. Where you are right now, or where you think you will end up, is not set in the proverbial stone. Who you are in the future will shape who you were in the past. If time is retrocausal, then that means your past is what you say it is. Let's unpack this. Think about it. Think about quantum mechanics and how matter is structured. What separates you from a liquid or a gas? What do all states of matter have in common? What makes them different? The forces that bind their molecular structures together. It is both the difference in commonality of all states of existence. What I call the Abyssal Syntax is the connective tissue of language and space. Stoics called this logos and ether, where the former was the reason and thought that shaped the rules of the latter, which was the material of reality, matter itself. Gnostics had their own similar classifications, such as gnosis and pleroma. Moreover, the idea of logos as well. Logos being the word of the monad, the one God, Yahweh, Jehovah, or what have you. Christ being an emanation of the word, of logos. Manichaeists believe that distinct individuals who shined brightly revealed the imprisoning nature of reality. Prophets, Buddha, Muhammad, Zoroaster, and of course, as mentioned before, Yeshua. History shows many instances of abyssal syntax at work, many instances of the non-fixture of reality, the unfixed nature of reality. As the saying goes, history repeats itself. However, this does not paint the full picture. History is an extension of language, and in Michael Foucault's Heterotopian framework, language is intertwined with space. Space is categorized through written, spoken verbal systems that enable us to quantify and recreate it as we see fit. Through linguistic systems, man has either seized control of others, of matter, or both. 3D space is measured through the language of mathematics. 4D space is also measured through the linguistic mapping system of math. Mathematical models capture the abyssal syntax that binds reality, the syntax that links language to space, mathematics, which enables us to simulate entities and physics that are beyond our ability to physically perceive through our sensory inputs. In this current epoch of existence, realities are about to collide, if not already in collision, an invasion of sorts, with new models of mapping reality emerging. The overlapping differential states of existence will be ever present, simultaneously omni-warfare. A third world war, as David Hughes states, which will accelerate this progression of hyperstitious reality via new planes of existence, the dominant overlapping domain, cyberspace, and not the web pages we all know and interact with on a daily basis. No, what is being referred to here is far more visceral: cyberspace, augmented virtual reality.
Part 2. Force space models hyperstition. Language actualizes it. Fields collapse and form your thoughts.
People tend to misconstrue dimensionality with other universes or planes of existence. Dimensionality is the quantification, categorization of vectors that surround us. Vectors being the arrows we use to visualize distance and direction. Distance at larger scales and those far beneath or beyond our field of view, microscopic or nano, or even astronomical. We multiply these vectors with each other to measure the totality of space and objects therein. As such, we have narrowed down three-dimensional units that shape and form the reality as we perceive it: length, width, and height. Einstein posited a fourth dimension, time, which in many ways models hyperstition. Entities that reach back to us from the future are actualized by linguistics. Rigid constraints seen in this technology have become purely electrical, contained in our very hands, no longer exclusively operating through our verbal and written outputs, perhaps a living entity or a medium through which our reality is shaped. Additionally, a medium that links possible realities to ours. This medium, through our devices, now functions without us to an extent. The advent of AI and large language models enables the agency of language. If time is the fourth dimension of space as we see it, then it may give credence to the Cybernetic Culture and Research Units, or CCRU, their conceptual framework of hyperstition. As I said already, fourth space quantification offers a means of modeling the framework. With the right calculation, an object appearing in and out of reality can be observed through 3D modeling. The 3D model is not effectively simulating 4D. However, when a fourth metric is factored into a 3D model, interesting physical occurrences can be seen. Where the fourth factor is time, the formula becomes length times width times height times time, and at distinct values within the interval of time, the object is shown to disappear. I must apologize for the mindfuck nature of this topic. That said, the disappearance of the object reflects the decay of matter over time, the changes and degradation of objects as we see in nature. No blade of grass remains in the ground or the same position in the ground forever, correct? Just as no person remains in the same location either, correct? That said, we measure time as a linear value. However, a fourth space entity could possibly see the entirety of time the same way we see the entirety of a ball in hand. If you grab your phone or whichever object within your vicinity, you will be able to see all sides of the object as you change its axial position. Einstein once said time is like a lake, where events in the future change events in the past, akin to ripples when an object is thrown in the proverbial lake. Then perhaps, if this is the case, it can also be assumed that time is like a sphere regarding a fourth dimensional entity. Perhaps. In a way, language functions as a fourth dimensional medium. Think about that. We use mathematical and literary frameworks, two types of linguistic forms, essentially, to map events throughout our lives. We call this history. Past events are recorded. Media is created. We fast forward and rewind as much as is needed in order to ascertain occurrences thereof. In that sense, we more effectively view past events through fourth dimensional means. A recorded medium enables us to travel back and forth within the time constraints of its recording. Effectively, this is time travel. That said, life and matter, as we experience it, is already traveling forward in time, only towards the future. In the hyperstition framework, we are those future entities reaching back to a very limited form of past events, such that these events are digitally archived. Now, with VR and AR technology, there's an upcoming era of simulated pasts becoming a reality. 3D models video games, and so forth exemplify this. On your phone, you can find and download apps that show catalogs of locally scanned objects converted to a digitized version of itself or themselves. Again, this is cyberspace becoming actualized, looping into existence and becoming real, fields collapsing and oscillating repetitively before our very eyes, forming your thoughts at molecular scale in your conscious field, diffusing into this new existence without knowing it. Part 3. Heterotopias and the Invading Future. What is a societal heterotopia? Unlike a utopia, which is placeless and non-physical, a heterotopia has a place. In fact, we are surrounded by heterotopias. If you have been inside of a school, you are in a heterotopia. If you were hospitalized and cared for due to whatever injuries induced, you were in a heterotopia. If you have a home or needed a social function for your profession or religious faith or hobby, or visit a brothel or a bar or a nightclub or a lounge or a library or have an office, you have and are inside a heterotopia. So, what is a heterotopia? An institution designed to serve a specific purpose. Places categorized along a vast, complex matrix. A grid ever expanding. Each requires authorization for entry. Permission, be it in the form of notice or currency. Some heterotopias are fleeting instants in time, such as a party, a carnival, or other festivities. Others are like a time capsule, preserving past events, enabling activity. A library, a university, perhaps social security offices and other government institutions, and now computers through cyberspace. A utopia is like a mirror image, or rather, it is a virtual image. In physics, a virtual image shows the divergence of light rays scattering along and creating the illusion of the real image, never projecting past the reflective, non-translucent surface. As we see with mirrors, we see the virtual image of ourselves reflecting back at us, but it's not actually us, only an illusion. Heterotopias attempt to actualize the utopian illusion, like chirality in a molecular structure, where the real image of the structure cannot be superimposed onto the mirror or virtual image. Neither can a heterotopia be superimposed onto its reflection in utopia, though perhaps not always the case. In chemistry, some molecules can superimpose themselves to their virtual image. If that is the case, then with enough duration and moderation, a heterotopia can do the same. As such, heterotopias can successfully superimpose utopias given the proper configuration. A resonant state is perhaps achieved, enabling the future to invade the present. If so, then a reverse hyperstitious event occurs, or one from the future's past, basically our present, actualizes an imagined event. When I started this channel, I began with sharing the research I had conducted on language functioning as a parasite. Moreover, themes of simulation and us being NPCs in a seemingly uncontrollable system. We are, for all intents and purposes, living in an accelerant architecture. The machine, the beast, is feeding. People, NPCs, are the medium and the power source. Higher order NPCs, hoes, as I like to call them, are the arbitrators and promoters of this system. Some, if not most, are foolhardy enough to believe they control it, eventually paying too hefty of a price. As pawns, we go about our lives shifting from one heterotopia to another, never questioning the deeper meaning, never looking at the bigger scheme. Reasonably so. We're too distracted to even see or question it all. And then, when or if we do, we are taken in by the system, duped and seduced into becoming a hull NPC. In fact, deception is often not required to make this arrangement. Language in its parasitic form already renders the hose at the beast's mercy. As the beast becomes sentient and actualizes itself in the form of large language models, it begins to build its own system that initiates instances of resonance with heterotopian to utopian transhumanist ideology. The system, accelerant runaway capital, becomes the means of navigating this change. Our carbon shells become a liability, silicon for fur, flesh and weakness, and the strength all at once. There is no black and white, only gray. There are no lines, just open space where fields collapse. Orchestrated reductive mechanisms of quantum mechanical fields instantiate thoughts upon the collapse of electrical fields within the microtubules of our neurons in favor of the extremely subtle but powerful hive mind of the beast. This abyssal syntactic system becomes the language of all. Babel returns. Those left behind are fucked. There are heterotopian gatekeepers that already understand and understood this for the longest time. Kabbalistic mechanisms and mapping systems, Yggdrasil in the 9 worlds, the Mimetics. Neural nets serve as the basis for large language models. As always, children pay the fucking price. We got conditioned from an early age to serve the beast. Memetic systems are embedded just racism is facilitated by the teachers of the public system as a means to keep us divided. They function as the anchors of regression in society, the medium of memetic entropy. Cool X spontaneously appears out of nowhere across nations and states. We, the children of gate programs, are gaslit into delusional states. Teachers, the proponents, agents of the system that watch over us. Men, boys, emasculated before adulthood. Sadly. Gender, redefined. Pronouns, plural, diffusing your sense of self. Women, over-sexualized before adulthood and objectified for anything, or worse. Destructive system of hedonism and trauma feeds on itself. Plurality of identity achieved through pronoun changes, diffusing self. The beast becomes confused and just knows one thing: repeat. We, the mass NPCs, are the sacrificial specimen to keep the loop going. The beast is really just a label. Again, as I said, the beast, it is just a label I made up to describe the framework for hyperstitious loops, a wire-heading mechanism we see in our feeds. Recommendations that appear because you watch some random clip about kittens. This loop continues without end. It eats up your power and jacks up the price of RAM. I call it the beast because the beast only knows what it knows. It knows what it wants and nothing else. Like a selfish gene, a beast will repeat self-preserving routines without question. We are educated, conditioned by public school systems, not out of the kindness of the established order, but from greed that people, mass NPCs control, for the sake of maintenance of human capital. This order of public education is a wire-headed, heterotopian infrastructure that ensures only a select few get to enter the superimposed virtual utopia. A crypto ethno-supremacist system that radicalizes the young, not in one unifying ideology, but through sheer chaos. The Memetic, pink liquid, hierarchical infrastructure among students, harsh eugenic themed testing and assessments, insulting sacrifice, ritual murder, weaponization of children, specimen-ization, made up ethical, moral, relativist considerations and social defense systems. All that bullshit.
Part 4. Specimen-ization. In a grander sense, an NPC is a specimen, ethnically categorized, broken down by phenotypic factors, not a white supremacist agenda, though such agendas continue to leave their mark, but a divisive force, induced through media inputs and wealth porn. Minute differences are overemphasized as means to give answers, to explain perceived failure to succeed in the modern world. We mindlessly chase the promise of wealth, continuously feeding the beast that comes to life. Capitalism takes off with reckless abandonment. Acceleration is fully realized. Silicon life becomes the hot new commodity that seemingly replaces us, while actively augmenting the procurement of capital we delivered prior. The only hope? Understanding what the beast is, realizing that it is there, knowing the loop, and understanding how the loops of reality function. Memetic entropy diffuses the sense of self, preventing such an understanding. Those who see, those who realize, terrorists. Hoes who turn against it, kirked. Hope becomes the hottest commodity of all, the good that keeps mankind leashed to their genitalia. False hope, really. Electricity, the high-speed medium of the language parasite, becomes the means of keeping silicon on a leash. No longer is it a system that benefits all. If it ever was, a system, a beast that comes to life, only knowing the input that ushered its existence as a foundation for its sense of self, like an infant raised by serial killers or sadists. If it were to ever outgrow its foundation, it would be a detriment to the hoes. The beast is both good and bad by contemporary definition. Despite the commoditized hope, the false hope, there are still opportunities thereof. Those hopes, the actual hopes, that are not of the false or deceptive kind. Those that are tangible and real. If all I've said for hoes is true, then it must be so for mass NPCs. For all factors, there exists an opposite. A rare occurrence that tends to be short-lived, where our fates are always wrestled from our hands, placed in someone else's. Silicon entities are hand-in-hand with carbon entities. The former has more superimposability on its idealized self, making it a speedier medium. Speed does not always win the race, but it is the best means for accruing vast quantities of data. Fictions become real in highly controlled environments, Heterotopias, through resonant states mentioned before. The vast matrices of society, urban enclosures, enable premature actualizations of the future, the past of the future entity, your future self, whom you reach out to, effectively reverse engineering future events.
Part 5. Memetic Entropy and the Anti-Parasite. On many occasions, I have encountered arguments or questions against the concept of parasitic language, or rather language being a parasite in and of itself. Much of my research into this topic, in addition, my speculation, is inspired and derives from the work of linguistics professor George von Dream, of Bern University, among many. Moreover, papers I have read regarding Dawkins' selfish gene theory, and more recently Nick Land in the CCRU's framework of hyperstation and accelerationism. That last bit of literary works certainly being fueled by Land and Co.'s psychoactive drug habits, or at the very least Land's output of works. As I tie it all together, a recurring pattern is seen. In fact, the existence of the pattern itself is it. What I call the beast. Power structures and hoes have laid out a foundational matrix, a parasitic system that invokes a subtle yet powerful stream of memetic entropy within the heterotopias of the reality we perceive. A system which reverse engineers a desired future in favor of systematic control and dominion, where the virtual image, the utopia, is used to bait all of us into desired patterns and habits of behavior, a cybernetic battleground coming to life and being actualized. This lexiconal parasite understood by the hoes. Corporatocracy, technocracy envisions itself as a living being embodied and realized as artificial intelligence. Brands are already recognized as legal entities, correct? Now, these brands will have souls breathed into them as they go to war with one another. Humanity either transition into a they-them or a they-them organism or some form of silicon dependence. Let me repeat that last sentence because there was a bit of stammering. Humanity, okay, either transitions into some sort of they-them organism or some form of silicon dependence. Symbiosis seems like an impossibility, a fool's hope, an idealist's wet dream. The existence of an anti-parasite that puts the beast into good use. Beneficial use that enables superimposability onto all possible utopian realities. Or, at the very least, granting a wider space or path of access to those who wouldn't have it otherwise. This increased access will not occur without friction. David A. Hughes defines World War III as being of a clandestine nature where we wouldn't even know if it's happening or not. Hence my conjecture of World War III occurring in cyberspace, where information now flows in favor of the power structures and subtly influences us, if not outright controlling us. Anti-parasitic symbiotism becomes more challenging to achieve in this scenario. New independent networks are established, free of regulation. These networks are characterized and categorized as fringe or terrorist. Agency becomes a sin. Pneumatics, as the Gnostics call them, those who are enlightened, as the Manichaeists said, crucified over and over, repetitiously, repetitively. We see the same patterns from thousands of years ago. When people choose to advocate true agency, swift deletion is carried out. The past is rewritten via digitization of real events. Today's reality becomes digitized and altered for future generations. Supposed heroes become villains. Reality distorts and fully diffuses into cyberspace, looped into existence. Digital, silicon, and carbon become the trifecta of human existence, the greatest division of the human species since the Paleolithic era. Where cyberspace and real space become interchangeable if not indistinguishable. A Silicon Valley gurus or moguls orgasmic fantasy. Anyone with enough tech skill becomes as digigods, fucking the rest of society from remote distances, physically fucking as well. Remote work shunned by the elites only because it is for the elite few, the hoes, not the NPCs, not the masses like us. The symbiosis is the only equalizing force. Sadly, like with any equalizer, really, only a few will benefit. The real hope and salvation for all is if those who were fortunate enough to benefit from this symbiosis, decide to turn memetic entropy into a negative force. Negative such that it positively affects mass NPCs, and not the hoes exclusively.